Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Roland and these are the slides I used when I was teaching MAN471 Fundamentals of Project Management at International Business School in Suzhou between 2017 and when I left in September 2019. This is the third session where I was talking about methodologies and software, because when projects are so diverse and different, there's different ways that we can achieve success and different software that we need in order to do so. Now, I split this into these two segments exactly, talking about methodologies first and then taking a look at the different software items that are in use today. Many ways lead to Rome, and there are different ways to achieve success. And concerning methodologies, in this overview, you can see some of the methodologies that are being used today. And I always started with the traditional waterfall and critical path methods, and then introduced several methods of agile. There's obviously also PMI's body of knowledge, PMBOK. In the UK, we use Prince2, projects in controlled environment. Particularly if you want to join government projects, you need Prince2 qualifications. Now, smaller methodologies or smaller project management associations, such as Green Project Management and P3, have developed their own methodologies. Prism, for example, attempts to implement sustainability into the whole process, whereas P3 Express is a methodology that is based on PMI and Prince2 methodologies, but is attempting to add agile methodology to that in order to always stay in control of the project. Traditional project management is where project management is originally from. The waterfall method and later on critical path method are used in large-scale projects since the beginning of project management. They all have in common that these methodologies are a step-by-step logical flow of activities from concept of the project to delivery. Now, the advantage is obviously the logical and strict order. That makes it so easy to replicate, even if people do have very limited or no experience with project management at all. And the many planning items that we need to go through in order to develop a project plan enable us to reduce the risk. However, that also means a lot of work is going into the pre-planning of this project, and that leaves us very limited room for change. Critical path method is adding priorities to different workflows that could technically happen at the same time by using their interdependency, creating a path from start to finish that we can then use when we want to adjust duration of the project. Now, obviously, this is adding a lot of flexibility to it, but remains logically ordered so that we have a logical flow now with priorities and resources added, which then in turn, adding flexibility, alters our risk profile. Which means for every time we touch the project, adjusting duration or changing things around using our flexibility, we need to make sure that our risk evaluation remains up to date. Very often these changes and this flexibility is asking very hard decisions from us, the project manager. Now, Project Management Body of Knowledge, PMI's book, is not a methodology per se, but a collection of standards that project managers all around the world agree upon of this is how we are handling different stages of a project. And essentially what it does, it breaks the project down into 5 process areas: initiating, planning, executing, controlling, and closing. For every single step of this workflow, there is different items that we need to focus on, that we need to complete in order to close the stage and move on to the next one. Now obviously this logical strict order is giving us a good framework, but is also boxing us in and takes away a lot of flexibility that we need, particularly in software development projects. Very often software development projects fail because the end product is working absolutely fine, but it is not what the end user wanted. Agile therefore focuses on a continued iterative interaction and development together with the customer, which shifts the focus to value delivery and collaboration, particularly with the main stakeholder, and that is the user. Agile comes in different flavors such as Scrum and Kanban, but all of these methodologies have in common that we break the project down into different phases, different iterations, which we call sprints. Now within this sprint, what we are doing is, as much as possible, we develop the project together with the customer, while at the same time attempting to not implement large-scale changes during sprints. Now, all of this requires a lot of effort and input from everybody involved. And there is potentially large changes from start to finish. And therefore, particularly in software projects, we attempt to collate the feedback and implement changes between sprints so that we know at the beginning of the next sprint, this action has led to this feedback and to this kind of action which we now try to implement. This allows a swift response to requests, but at the same time enables a very close collaboration with the end user. So we are moving away with this interaction with the user from a process-oriented project towards a target-oriented project. Now, as it happens, there is a project manager, the Scrum Master in Scrum, that clears any obstacles to the work cycle. For example, organizing resources, organizing meetings. And in these daily meetings, everybody exchanges important information about the project. Therefore, these sprints need to be short because the iterative approach alters the next step. And if those sprints are too long, we collect a huge amount of feedback that we then need to implement. Reducing the cycle of sprints to fewer days, fewer weeks, allows us to minimize the amount of change that we need to do. Now, how does this work? What does one cycle look like? Now, at the beginning, we plan the next sprint. We have our daily scrums and work on our project. Towards the end of this sprint cycle, we review the sprint, do our lessons learned review, implement the feedback from the customer, and go to the next cycle using what we have learned in order to plan the next step. Now, in every single sprint, we need to set several goals. And any change that would alter these goals is prohibited. We can't do that during the sprint. And we will not allow any modification of quality. The scope, however, remains open for change. Problem is that, particularly in software development again, the customer often doesn't know what they want. So scope creep is a real thing here, and it takes a very strong project manager to limit the amount of scope creep, also in order to keep the cost down. Because continuous engagement and testing and implementation of feedback costs a lot of money. Now Kanban looks completely different. Here in the background you can see a Kanban board with different sections and different stickers in this case that describe the project and the actions right now as they are. This was developed by Toyota in order to reduce stock with their just-in-time logistics. It's a very direct approach with push and pull actions all the time. Now what this does, it creates chains of interaction with predefined causal action and reaction relationships. For example, I put a sticker on the board, I need this part. I need this amount of parts and I need them then. The person responsible for the orders is taking this sticker, puts it in the next segment of the board to indicate, yeah, that's in the works, I'm doing that. And moving it to the completed tasks once they are done. Now the pros for Kanban are, if we have a steady flow of outputs that are required in order to achieve project success. It is absolutely visual. You have an immediate overview by using these color-coded stickers or color-coded cards, and it requires a very small amount of training. So it is very simple. On the other side, it has very limited use for external communication. It is an internal-only project management methodology and requires extensive documentation, because while it takes little training in order to achieve what you want to achieve, everything needs to be documented so that the two people or the two departments interacting with this Kanban board know what's going on at all times. It's also a very static methodology. Everything has to be predefined and documented, which makes it a little more clumsy than the Scrum approach. Two relatively new components of Agile project management are extreme programming and adaptive project framework. These allow changes within sprints, so you don't have a fixed scope. The scope is floating, and these methodologies have basically change written into them and require constant review of the project, basically daily. So adaptive project framework is insofar unique that it is based on the requirements. So we have fixed requirements and try to fulfill them. Not as in fixed scope, fixed outcomes, fixed processes, and these are the capabilities we have, we need to allocate them. In APF, you are absolutely encouraged to alter the resource base at all times. Now, Prince2 is a government standard here in the UK, and it's a product-based planning approach. All the high-level activities, for example, resource allocation, are performed by a so-called project board, while the project manager performs lower-level activities such as scheduling, and it has the most extensive reporting requirements of all methodologies. Now, what this does, before we go to Prism, extensive reporting requirements. If you, for example, need to fill out 20 forms in order to get a small change done, you are starting to ask yourself, is this really worth the effort? Is it really so necessary so that I fill in all these forms, get approval and get it implemented? And one of the reasons may be that the government realized that public projects were always over budget, not delivered on time, and the scope creep was immense. So they tried to literally box everything in and make everything extremely bureaucratic in order to be in control of the project at all times. This is what means controlled environment. Now, PRISM stands for Projects Integrating Sustainable Methods. It was developed by Green Project Management, and it attempts to incorporate sustainability into a repeatable process for very large-scale projects. And like a number of others, this actually requires accreditation from Green Project Management. Here's an overview that GPM published, and I think it's stands for itself. Now, as we can see, the language on these boards is focusing on a more sustainable, total ownership focused idea of project management. And what it does is it allows us to walk the talk and improve our stakeholder engagement, which in turn increases trust between all stakeholders. It aims to reduce the environmental footprint and realize savings for the organization while doing good. It also ties in with other green initiatives, for example, the UN Global Compact, but it does not work isolated. And the whole organization needs to subscribe to it, needs to buy in, and the implementation of such a large-scale framework costs a lot of time and money until you have successfully implemented. Obviously, being a smaller project management association, there is also a smaller cloud of prestige when you are certified by GPM as is opposed to, for example, PMI. Now, the latest framework is P3 Express. And at the time when I was teaching this, they were redeveloping the processes, which they have just finished earlier in 2022. And it works on the so-called KISS principle, which means keep it simple, stupid, which makes it a tool very useful for small and medium-sized enterprises that do not have the resource base, personnel base, or experience to run large-scale projects. The fact that it is open source also allows continuous review when we find projects that could do with alterations of this process. And what it is basically putting PMI Prince 2 together with Agile, attempting to review the project at all times so that only strategic fitting projects are being implemented. Now, this is what it looks like, and it consists of daily, weekly, and cycle activities. It adds preparation activities to the front, and at the end of the project, we have certain closing activities, which include especially the post-project review. I am focusing one session on the lessons learned or post-project review because it is so important and so neglected in many, many projects. Now I have found P3 to be extremely pragmatic, focusing on the planning and control of the plan, facilitating stakeholder engagement, because a project doesn't exist on itself. A project exists within an organization, and the organization exists within the business environment. And yeah, a little retrospective. I was in advanced talks with both the management of P3 and GPM in order to get my teaching and the whole program I managed accredited by one or both Project Management Association. And unfortunately, this has not materialized with me leaving. Now, this session was aimed to be a little bit of relaxation between the initial shock of this is actually a lot of work and practical implementation of what we have learned so far and what we are going to need later on in the practice session of project selection. And what I attempted to do was to give sort of an overview and show people there is a lot of software tools and you actually need to use what works for you. Now, the market leader is obviously Microsoft Project. It is readily available. It has an intuitive user interface integrating itself into the Office environment that you also know. It is a one-stop solution, the most stable of all programs. The problem is it is rather expensive. At the time of when I was teaching, it had no mobile apps. And the problem is which version is compatible with what version of Office. There is a Mac version, but this is only web-based. You don't have an app or a program on your computer. This is what it looks like. And you can see the very familiar look and user interface and the feeling when you use the Office software. It's essentially the same, but in this case looking at projects. Now the first challenger to this is Rike, which uses a very minimal user interface and offers mobile apps, so you can work on projects on the go. It offers a lot of integrations and tools for collaboration and other items and is relatively cheap with about $10 a month for the standard version. The question is, what is it actually compatible with? By having a minimalist approach and being not MS Office, it is not always simple or intuitive to know what you are doing. And a lot of users have told me, well, occasionally there is lag, which means between action and reaction of the software, there is a little bit of time delay, and it is browser based. So while this is an advantage for some people, I always think of it as a disadvantage, because you essentially need your computer or an app readily open, and you often need to switch between tabs or screens. This is what it looks like. And you can see, or you will see throughout this presentation of software, that these software look essentially the same when you are looking at, for example, the Gantt charts. Now, Project Libra is my go-to place if I want an open source alternative to MS Project. There is 2 different versions of it, and it aims to closely replicate the experience in MS Project. It is also platform independent. I'm using it on Windows as well as on Linux. And you also have an option to use it on your Mac. The problem is it is not always intuitive, and close is not close enough. There is several items that you need to manually handle, while MS Project does this automatically. Now, I'm putting down their price because while the community edition is free, basically free open source software, you are paying a price by the high learning curve. You need to adapt and change your working style when you are coming from MS Project and start to use Project Libra. And that can be a con or a contrapoint for using Project Libra. This is what it looks like. And in practice, I have actually found it to be very, very useful. For example, you really have to know what you're doing when you are shifting activities around. You can do that, but if you don't know what you're doing, you are better off using MS Project. Now, Basecamp is a software where you pay for using it as a business, not for a single user. And it is basically the software with the best customer support. It offers a small learning curve with a simple user interface and integrates collaborative chat as well as document sharing. Now, one of the downsides, again, I say this is a downside, is browser-based, and it is relatively expensive. It costs $1,000 a year, although the educational sector gets it for free, and you need an extension in order to use Gantt charts. Now, Gantt charts are the go-to visualization of all projects, and if I need an extension for that, why do I not just use another software altogether? Now, Project in a Box aims to be completely framework independent. It is priced from free to 4,000 and more pounds. The standard version for using it in Prince 2 costs 99 plus 15 pounds. Those are 2018 prices. It can be run from a USB drive. So it is highly flexible. It doesn't matter which environment you are in. You just plug in your USB and start running it. Now the problem is what is the compatibility with what you are already using, and you essentially have two programs, which is Projects in a Box and Planner. So, and if I need a go-to place, I want a single software, not multiple items. Again, this is what it looks like, and you can see it has a lot of templates and help functions that enable you to complete projects. For example, all the Prince 2 templates are in there. Oracle Primavera is equally browser-based, and it's an integrative bottom-up approach to the project. So everybody is always on the same page. What it does, it focuses on enterprise portfolio management and the project management office. So this is or has been the go-to place for a project management office, while nowadays the executive version, so to speak, of MS Project wants to be the same thing. Unfortunately, I can't give you a price on the MS Project alternative, because the website says go ask our customer support, because this is hosted at the organization. There's also Project Kickstart, which integrates into MS Office, has a clear UI, and is relatively affordable at $199 or $299 US. The question is, what is the compatibility with it? And how does it integrate into your workflow? And at the time of when I compiled this slide, the company had just been acquired. There were no apps, and the current version of the software was relatively old. This is a screenshot that I got from the sales page. And as I said, all these Gantt charts look essentially the same. Now, challenger number 7, Asana, has the advantage it integrates with, for example, Google Drive, GitHub, and the like, and it is either free or costs $120. And when you are working with projects that have a lot of intersections, for example, Google Drive, GitHub, and so on, You want a tool that allows you to share across all these things and to use all these things at the same time. Again, I say it's browser-based. It does not have Gantt charts. And again, how does it fit into your normal office workflow? What is the compatibility? As a conclusion, we could say that do test your options. Many of these softwares have free trials. Focus on learning project management, not the sector, not the software. Use what is best for you. And when you have the opportunity to learn from somebody who has been on projects and using these softwares for a longer time than you do, try to learn from them. For a lot of people, it does make sense to get additional qualifications such as Prince 2, PMI, GPM, P3 Express. It is not mandatory, I would say. Some organizations require it, other organizations don't. So do follow what is best for your project management career and experience. Thank you very much for your attention. See you on the next session.